The briefing room at Fort Bragg was cold that morning, not from the air conditioning, but from the eyes of every man sitting around that long table. Captain Sarah Reeves stood in the doorway. Her boots were polished. Her uniform was crisp. Her shoulders were squared like she'd been taught at West Point 7 years ago. But none of that mattered right now, because the 12 men inside that room had already decided she didn't belong there. "Ma'am, I think you have the wrong briefing." The voice came from Colonel Marcus Hale. He sat at the head of the table, gray hair, hard jaw, 3 decades of service carved into the lines of his face. Sarah didn't move. "No, sir, I have the right room." Hale's eyebrows lifted. Around him, the other officers exchanged glances. Some smirked. Some looked away. One man in the corner actually laughed. "This is a classified operational briefing," Hale said slowly, like he was talking to a child. "Tier 1 assets only. I don't know who told you to come here, but Colonel Davis sent me, sir." Sarah's voice was steady, calm, even though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "I'm here to volunteer for Operation Nightfall." The room went silent. Then someone laughed again. Louder this time. It was Lieutenant Colonel Brad Stryker. Broad shoulders, thick neck, the kind of man who filled every room he entered. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "You've got to be kidding me," Stryker said. He looked at Hale. "Sir, this is a direct action mission. Into cartel territory. We're talking about crossing into the Sierra Madre Mountains. Hostile terrain, armed combatants. Probable contact within the first 6 hours." He jerked his thumb towards Sarah. "And Davis wants to send her?" Sarah felt the heat rising in her chest, but she kept her face blank. She'd been through this before. "Too many times to count. I'm qualified," she said. Stryker snorted. "Qualified, right." He looked her up and down. "What do you supply, admin?" "Let me guess, intelligence analyst?" "Former Army Ranger. 2nd Battalion. 3 deployments to Afghanistan. 2 to Iraq." Sarah's voice didn't waver. "Sniper qualified. Combat medic certified. Fluent in Spanish and Pashto. And I've spent the last 18 months working infiltration ops along the southern border." That got their attention. A few of the men sat up straighter, but Stryker just shook his head. "Ranger qualified doesn't mean Ranger experienced," he said. "I don't care what schools you went to or what boxes you checked. This isn't some diversity program. This mission is too important. We've got 18 American hostages being held by the Sinaloa cartel. 18 families waiting for their loved ones to come home. And you think we're going to risk their lives so you can prove a point?" The words hit like punches, but Sarah had learned long ago not to flinch. "I'm not trying to prove anything, sir," she said quietly. "I'm trying to help bring those people home." Hale raised a hand. The room quieted. He studied Sarah for a long moment. His eyes were like steel. "Captain Reeves," he said, "I appreciate your dedication. But Lieutenant Colonel Stryker is right. This operation requires a very specific skill set. We need operators who have experience in close-quarters combat, hostage rescue, high-altitude mountain warfare, and most importantly," he paused, "we need people who understand what it means to walk into a cartel stronghold. Because if you've never faced that kind of evil before, you can't prepare for it." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Sir, we're going up against Los Fantasmas," Hale continued. His voice was harder now. "The ghosts. They're not soldiers. They're butchers. They've killed over 300 people in the last 2 years alone. And the hostages we're extracting? They're being held in a compound run by a man named El Serpiente. You know what he does to people, Captain? He doesn't just kill them. He makes them wish they'd never been born." The room felt smaller, darker. Sarah swallowed. "I understand the stakes, sir. Do you?" Stryker cut in. He leaned forward. "Have you ever seen what these animals do to their victims? Have you ever walked through a village where they've hung bodies from bridges, where they've left messages written in blood? Because I have. We all have." He gestured around the room. "Every man here has been in that darkness. And it changes you, forever." "I know," Sarah said softly. "You know?" Stryker's laugh was bitter. "No offense, Captain, but reading reports isn't the same as living it. You can't just—" "I was there," 3 words, quiet as snow falling. But they stopped Stryker mid-sentence. Sarah took a breath. 3 years ago, I was part of a humanitarian convoy near the border. Medical supplies, food, basic aid for refugee camps." Her voice was steady, but something flickered in her eyes, something dark and deep. "We were ambushed 12 miles outside of Ciudad Juarez. Los Fantasmas hit us at dawn. 23 people in that convoy. Aid workers, drivers, security contractors. The room was dead silent now. By sunset, Sarah continued, only 4 of us were still alive. Hale's expression shifted. Just slightly. I don't have any record of it was off book, sir. Private funding. We were trying to help civilians caught between the cartels and the federales. Sarah's hands were steady at her sides, but her voice carried weight now. Real weight. Los Fantasmas took us to a compound in the mountains. El Serpiente was there. I spent 9 days in that place before a joint task force raided it. Stryker's smirk had vanished. If that's true, why isn't it in your file? Because the State Department buried it, Sarah said flatly. Political complications. Diplomatic fallout. The Mexican government denied the whole thing ever happened. Everyone who survived was debriefed and told to forget it. Her eyes locked onto Hale's. But I didn't forget, sir. I can't. And when I heard about those 18 hostages, I knew exactly where they're being held. Because I've been inside that compound. I know the layout, the guard rotations, the weak points in their security. The silence stretched like a wire pulled tight. Then Hale spoke. His voice was different now. Careful. That's a serious claim, Captain. It's the truth, sir. Then you'll understand why we need proof. Hale stood up, walked around the table, stopped 3 feet from Sarah. Los Fantasmas mark their prisoners. Everyone knows that. It's how they keep track of who belongs to them. If you were really held by El Serpiente, he paused, you'd have a scar, a very specific scar. Sarah's heart was pounding now, but not from fear, from something else, something that had been buried deep for 3 years. She met Hale's eyes. Yes, sir, she said quietly. I would. And then, without breaking eye contact, she reached up and began unbuttoning her uniform collar. The room held its breath. Sarah's fingers moved slowly. 1 button. Then another. The room was so quiet you could hear the fabric shifting. She pulled her collar aside, turned her head to the left, and exposed the side of her neck. The scar ran from just below her ear down to her collarbone. Thin, precise, deliberate. It formed a symbol that every person in that room recognized immediately. A serpent. Coiled and ready to strike, carved into her skin. Someone swore under their breath. Another man looked away. But Hale just stared. His face had gone pale. Jesus Christ, he whispered. Stryker stood up abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. For the first time since Sarah had entered the room, he had nothing to say. Sarah buttoned her collar back up. Her hands were steady. But inside she was back in that compound. Back in the darkness. Back in the place where she'd learned what it meant to survive. El Serpiente marks everyone he keeps for more than 48 hours. She said quietly. It's his signature. His way of claiming ownership. She touched the side of her neck. I wore turtlenecks for 2 years after I got out. Couldn't stand people seeing it. Couldn't stand the questions. Hale sat back down. He looked 10 years older than he had 5 minutes ago. Why didn't you report this through proper channels? Why keep it hidden? Because they told me to, sir. Sarah's voice carried an edge now. The debrief officers, the State Department officials, everyone who pulled us out of that hell. They said if we talked about what happened, it would jeopardize ongoing operations, endanger lives, create an international incident. She paused, so I stayed quiet. I went to therapy. I tried to move on, but every night I see those faces, the people who didn't make it out. And I hear their screams. The room felt smaller, darker, like the walls were closing in. 3 years, Stryker said slowly. He was looking at Sarah differently now. You've been carrying this for 3 years, and you never said anything. What was I supposed to say? Sarah's voice cracked just slightly. That I failed them? That I survived when 23 other people died? That I can still smell the blood and the gasoline and the... She stopped. Took a breath. Steadied herself. I did what I was told, sir. I buried it. I kept serving. I tried to forget. But you didn't forget, Hale said softly. No, sir, I didn't. Sarah's eyes were hard now. Determined. And when I heard about Operation Nightfall, when I learned that 18 Americans were being held in the exact same compound where I was kept, I knew I had to speak up. Because those people don't have 3 years. They might not have 3 days. And if there's even a chance that what I know can help bring them home alive, She straightened her shoulders. Then I'm asking you to let me try. Hale exchanged a look with Stryker. Something passed between them. An understanding. A calculation, the compound, Hale said. Describe it. Sarah didn't hesitate. Converted hacienda. 18th century Spanish colonial architecture. Sits on a plateau approximately 7,000 feet up in the Sierra Madre Occidental. 3 main buildings arranged in a U-shape around a central courtyard. The hostages will be kept in the eastern wing. That's where they always keep prisoners. Basement level. Stone walls. 3 feet thick. Only 2 access points, a main stairwell and a service entrance that most people don't know about. She could see it in her mind. Every detail. Every shadow. Guard rotation changes every 6 hours, she continued. But there's a 15-minute gap during shift change when the basement is only watched by cameras. If you know where the blind spots are, you can move through the lower level without being seen. There's an old drainage tunnel that runs under the eastern wing. It was built as an escape route during the Mexican Revolution. Most of it collapsed decades ago, but there's a section that's still passable. Tight fit, maybe 2 feet wide. But it opens up into a storage room adjacent to the holding cells. Stryker was taking notes now, actually writing. How do you know the tunnel is still open? Because that's how I escaped, Sarah said quietly. The room went silent again. Hale leaned forward. Tell me. Sarah closed her eyes. She was back there now. Back in the dark, day 7, she said. El Serpiente had finished with me. She didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. Everyone in that room understood what that meant. He threw me back in the cell. I was bleeding, broken. I thought I was going to die down there. She opened her eyes. But there was a woman in the cell with me, Elena. She'd been there for 3 weeks. She knew things. Secrets about the compound. And she told me about the tunnel. Where is Elena now? Hale asked. Sarah's jaw tightened. She didn't make it out. No one spoke. She was too weak to crawl through, Sarah continued. Her voice was flat now. Emotionless. Like she was reading from a report. So she stayed behind. Created a distraction. Drew the guards away while I escaped through the tunnel. I heard the gunshots before I even made it to the other side. She paused. I ran for 3 miles through the mountains before the task force picked me up. I was covered in blood. Most of it wasn't mine. Stryker set down his pen. He looked at Sarah for a long moment. And you want to go back there? It wasn't a question. But Sarah answered anyway, yes, sir. Why? Because Elena gave her life so I could escape. And every day since then, I've asked myself what I'm supposed to do with that gift, how I'm supposed to honor her sacrifice. Sarah's voice was steady, strong. Those 18 hostages, they're in the same cells where Elena died, where others are dying right now, and I have information that could save them. So yes, sir, I want to go back. I need to go back. Hale stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the base beyond. The morning sun was higher now, bright and harsh. This mission is voluntary, he said without turning around. Every operator going in knows the risks, knows there's a good chance they won't come back. And you're telling me you want to walk back into the place where you were tortured, where you were marked like an animal, where you watched people die. He turned to face her. That's not bravery, Captain. That's trauma. And I can't in good conscience send someone into hostile territory when their judgment might be compromised by PTSD. Sarah felt something break inside her chest, but she kept her voice level. Sir, I've been cleared by psych eval every year since. Those evaluators didn't know the full story, Hale interrupted. You kept this hidden, remember? Which means every evaluation you've had was based on incomplete information. I'm fit for duty, sir. Are you? Hale's voice was gentler now, almost kind. Or are you looking for a way to make peace with something that can never be made right? The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but something in Hale's eyes stopped her. Because maybe he was right. Maybe this wasn't about the mission at all. Maybe it was about Elena, about guilt, about the weight of surviving when others didn't. But then she thought about those 18 faces. The photos she'd seen in the briefing file. The families waiting. The children who wanted their parents back. The spouses who went to bed every night wondering if their loved ones were still alive. And she knew it didn't matter why she wanted to go. All that mattered was that she could help. Sir, she said quietly, with all due respect, my reasons for volunteering are my own. But my knowledge of that compound is real. My experience is real, and those 18 people don't care whether I have PTSD or not. They just want to come home. Hale studied her, really looked at her, like he was trying to see past the uniform, past the scar, past everything she'd built up to protect herself. Then he looked at Stryker. What do you think? Stryker was quiet for a moment. Then he surprised everyone in the room. I think she's right, he said. Hale's eyebrows rose. Say that again. Stryker stood up. Walked over to the map on the wall. It showed the Sierra Madre Mountains. Red circles marked known cartel positions. A blue star marked the target compound. I think she's right, Stryker repeated. He tapped the map. We've been planning this op for 6 weeks. We've got satellite imagery, thermal scans, intelligence from informants, but none of it gives us what she has. He turned to look at Sarah. She's been inside. She knows the layout, the guard patterns, the blind spots, and most importantly, he paused, she knows what El Serpiente thinks like, how he operates. That's worth more than 100 satellite photos. Another officer spoke up. Major Chen, quiet guy, Special Forces, 20 years in. But can we trust her judgment under pressure? Sir, no disrespect to Captain Reeves, but going back to the place where you were held captive, that's a psychological minefield. What if she freezes? What if the memories overwhelm her? We can't afford mistakes on a mission like this. He's right, another voice added. Captain Morrison. Delta Force. I've seen operators crack under less stress. Good men, trained men, and they didn't have the personal history she's carrying. Sarah wanted to defend herself, wanted to tell them she was stronger than they thought. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Words were cheap. Talk was easy. These men had seen too many soldiers break to take anything on faith. Hale crossed his arms. Captain Reeves, step outside for a moment. It wasn't a request. Sarah's heart sank, but she nodded. Yes, sir. She walked out of the briefing room. The door closed behind her with a heavy thud. She stood in the hallway, alone. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Voices murmured behind the door, but she couldn't make out the words. She touched the side of her neck, felt the raised tissue beneath her collar. The scar that never let her forget. 3 years. 3 years of trying to move forward, of trying to be more than what had happened to her. And now these men were in that room deciding whether her trauma made her weak, whether her experience made her a liability. Part of her understood. She really did. They had 18 lives depending on perfect execution. One mistake could mean everyone dies, and bringing someone with emotional baggage into a high-stakes operation was a risk. But another part of her, the part that had crawled through a drainage tunnel while bleeding and broken, the part that had survived 9 days in hell, that part was angry, furious, because she'd earned her place. She'd proven herself over and over again, and still it wasn't enough. The door opened. Stryker stepped out. He closed the door behind him. For a moment, he just looked at her. His expression was unreadable. You really want this, he said. Not a question. Yes, sir. Even knowing what it'll cost you, emotionally, psychologically. He stepped closer. Captain, I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen what happens when operators go back to places that haunt them. It doesn't end well. Sarah met his eyes. What happened to me in that compound was the worst experience of my life. But it also taught me something. It taught me that I'm stronger than I thought. That I can endure things I never imagined. And that when everything is stripped away, dignity, hope, control, the only thing that matters is whether you keep fighting or give up. She paused. I kept fighting, sir. And I'm still fighting. Not for revenge. Not for closure. But because those 18 people deserve the same chance Elena gave me. Stryker studied her face. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Just slightly. Colonel Hale is going to give you a chance, he said. But there are conditions. Sarah's pulse quickened. What conditions? You don't go in with the primary assault team. You stay with command and control. Provide real-time intelligence. Guide us through the compound remotely. You give us the knowledge without putting yourself in the line of fire. It wasn't what she wanted, but it was something. More than she'd had 10 minutes ago. And if the situation changes? Sarah asked. If you need someone on the ground who knows the layout? Then we adapt, Stryker said. But that's my call to make. Not yours. His expression hardened. This is non-negotiable, Captain. You want in? Those are the terms. Sarah knew she should be grateful. Knew she should take the offer and be thankful for the opportunity. but something in her chest ached, because she'd been so close to actually doing something that mattered, to making Elena's sacrifice mean something. But she also knew that Stryker was giving her more than Hale probably wanted to. This was a compromise, a way to use her knowledge without risking the mission. "Yes, sir," she said finally. "I accept," Stryker nodded. "Good. We briefed the full team at 1400 hours. Mission launch is tomorrow at 0300. That gives you—" He checked his watch. 18 hours to prepare a detailed layout of the compound. Every room, every hallway, every guard post. I want it so detailed that my men can walk through that place blindfolded. You'll have it, sir. I know I will." Stryker turned to go back inside, then stopped. "Captain." "That scar on your neck. That mark El Serpiente gave you." He looked back at her. "I'm going to make sure he regrets it." That's a promise. Then he was gone, back into the briefing room, back to the planning that would determine whether 18 people lived or died. Sarah stood alone in that hallway for another moment. Then she straightened her uniform, squared her shoulders, and headed to the intelligence office. She had work to do. The next 18 hours blurred together. Sarah sat in a windowless room with 3 intelligence analysts and a combat artist. She described every inch of that compound, every detail she could remember. The artist sketched while she talked. The analysts cross-referenced her descriptions with satellite imagery and thermal scans. "The courtyard has a fountain," Sarah said. "Spanish colonial. Broken now. But there's a drainage grate at the base. It connects to the tunnel system I mentioned." The artist added it to the sketch. "What about the western wing?" "That's where El Serpiente lives. 3rd floor. Corner room with a balcony facing the mountains. He likes to stand there in the morning. Smoke cigars, watches the sun come up." Sarah's voice was flat, mechanical. "There are always 2 guards outside his door, another 2 at the base of the stairs. And the eastern wing? Where the hostages are." Sarah closed her eyes, saw it all again. The stone walls, the iron doors, the smell of fear and blood and desperation. "Basement level," she said quietly. "Main stairwell descends from the ground floor. 23 steps, stone. There's a guard station at the bottom. Usually 2 men, sometimes 3 during high alert periods. The cells are arranged along a corridor, 6 on each side, 12 total. Heavy doors, reinforced locks. The drainage tunnel I mentioned opens into a storage room at the far end. It's used for supplies, rarely guarded because there's only one entrance and they think it's secure." The artist was sketching furiously now. "This tunnel, how wide?" 2 feet at the narrowest point, maybe 3 feet at the widest. It runs for about 40 meters underground. There's standing water in some sections, rats, spiders, but it's passable. Sarah opened her eyes. "If your team can reach that storage room, they can access the cells without alerting the main guard station." One of the analysts spoke up. "Captain, this is incredible detail. But I have to ask, how can you remember all this? It's been 3 years. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. "Because I relived it every night in my dreams for 2 years straight. Every detail, every sound, every smell. You don't forget the place where you thought you were going to die." The room went quiet. They worked through the night. By dawn, they had a complete schematic of the compound. 3-dimensional models, guard rotation charts, entry and exit points, contingency plans for every scenario they could imagine. At 0200 hours, Stryker came to check their progress. He studied the layouts in silence. Then he nodded. "This is good work, Captain. Damn good work. Will it be enough, sir?" Stryker looked at her. "I don't know, but it gives us a fighting chance, and sometimes that's all you can ask for." An hour later, Sarah stood in the hangar and watched the assault team gear up. 12 operators, the best of the best. Delta Force, SEALs, Rangers, every one of them a veteran of countless missions, every one of them ready to walk into hell to bring those hostages home. Stryker approached her. He was in full tactical gear now. Face paint, body armor, weapons that looked like they meant business. "Command and control is set up in Blackhawk 2, he said. "You'll have direct comms with the assault team. Real-time video feeds. If we need your knowledge, you'll be right there." "Yes, sir." He started to walk away, then paused. "Captain, thank you for having the courage to speak up, for trusting us with your story." He met her eyes. "I know that wasn't easy." Sarah nodded. Couldn't quite find words. The team loaded into the helicopters. Engines roared to life. The hangar filled with noise and wind and the smell of jet fuel. Sarah climbed into Black Hawk 2, put on her headset. Strapped in next to the communications officer and the mission commander, Colonel Hale himself. The helicopter lifted off. The base fell away below them, and they flew south, toward the border, toward the mountains, toward the compound where Sarah had lost everything and somehow found herself. The flight took 3 hours. Sarah watched the landscape change below. Desert became foothills. Foothills became mountains. And all the while her heart pounded harder. She was going back. Not the way she'd wanted. Not on the ground with a weapon in her hands. But she was going back nonetheless, and this time she wasn't going to run. The helicopters came in low, skimming the mountaintops, flying dark, silent as ghosts. Sarah watched the terrain through the night vision monitors. Every ridge looked familiar. Every valley stirred memories she'd tried to bury. And then she saw it, the compound, exactly where she remembered it, perched on that plateau like a fortress, walls glowing pale green in the night vision, lights in a few windows. Everything else dark. All teams, this is Overwatch, Hale's voice crackled through the comms. We are 3 minutes from insertion point. Confirm ready status. One by one, the team leaders checked in. Their voices were calm, professional, but Sarah could hear the tension underneath. They all knew what they were flying into. Black Hawk 1 is breaking off for primary insertion, the pilot reported. Black Hawk 2 holding at observation point. Sarah's helicopter banked hard, circled around to a ridge overlooking the compound. They were half a mile away, far enough to be safe, close enough to see everything. The assault helicopter disappeared into the darkness, heading for the drop zone on the far side of the plateau. Hale looked at Sarah. This is it, Captain. Everything depends on whether your information is accurate. It is, sir. For their sake, I hope you're right. The next few minutes felt like hours. Sarah watched the monitors, watched the infrared signatures of the assault team fast roping down from the helicopter. Watched them hit the ground and move into position. Alpha team in position, Stryker's voice came through. Beginning approach to drainage tunnel access point. Sarah leaned closer to the monitor. Sir, the grate I mentioned, it's going to be rusted. They'll need to use cutting tools. But quietly. Sound carries in that courtyard. Copy that, Stryker replied. We brought the necessary equipment. On the thermal imaging, Sarah could see the team moving through the darkness. 12 green signatures, ghost-like, professional. They reached the courtyard wall, scaled it, dropped down on the other side. So far, so good. I've got the fountain, Stryker reported. The grate is... Jesus, you weren't kidding about the rust. Give us 2 minutes. Sarah's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists. On the monitor, she could see other thermal signatures inside the compound. Guards on patrol. Someone moving on the 3rd floor, probably El Serpiente. And in the basement clustered together a group of signatures that had to be the hostages. 18 people, right where she'd said they'd be. Grate is open, Stryker said. Entering tunnel now. The team disappeared from the thermal imaging as they descended underground. For a long moment, there was only silence on the comms. Just breathing. The rustle of equipment. The sound of boots moving through water. Sarah closed her eyes. She was back in that tunnel. Back in the darkness. She could feel the walls pressing in. Could smell the stagnant water and the decay. Could hear her own breathing echoing back at her. Captain Reeves. Hale's voice cut through her memories. Are you with us? Sarah opened her eyes. Yes, sir. You said the tunnel runs 40 meters. How long should it take them? At tactical speed with full gear. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe longer if there's debris. They waited. Every second stretched like an eternity. Then Stryker's voice crackled back. We've reached the end of the tunnel. I can see the storage room access panel. Preparing to breach. Wait, Sarah said suddenly. Sir, before you open that panel, check for wires. El Serpiente sometimes booby-traps secondary entrances. There was a pause. Then Stryker spoke again, his voice tight. Good call, Captain. I've got a tripwire here. Disarming now. Sarah let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. 30 seconds later. We're through. Inside the storage room. Proceeding to the cell corridor. On the thermal monitor, Sarah could see the team reappearing, moving down the hallway, getting closer to the cells, closer to the hostages. I've got eyes on the guard station, Stryker whispered. 3 tangos. Just like you said, we're moving to engage. What happened next took less than 10 seconds, but Sarah saw it all in perfect clarity. The assault team moved like water, silent, precise. The guards never knew what hit them. Guards neutralized, Stryker reported. Moving to the cells. We need those lock codes, Captain. Sarah's mind raced. The main control panel is on the north wall of the guard station. Default code is usually 6638, but El Serpiente changes it weekly. If that doesn't work, there's a manual override. Red lever behind the panel. Pull it down and the whole system unlocks. Copy that. Trying the code now. Silence. Then code worked. Cells are opening. We've got all 18. They're alive. Most of them anyway. Some need medical attention immediately. Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes. 18 people, alive. They'd actually done it. But then something changed. Alarms started blaring. Lights flooded the compound. And on the thermal monitor, Sarah saw signatures exploding into motion all over the facility. We've been made, Stryker shouted over the comms. All teams execute contingency plan Delta. We need extraction now. The mission commander was already on the radio. Black Hawk 1 moved to emergency extraction point. Black Hawk 2, stand by for potential fire support. On the monitor, Sarah watched chaos unfold. The assault team was moving fast, shepherding the hostages back toward the tunnel, but armed guards were pouring into the eastern wing. Dozens of them. More than the intelligence reports had predicted. Contact! Contact! Someone shouted. Gunfire crackled through the comms. Alpha team is pinned down. Stryker's voice was strained. We've got the hostages in the corridor, but we can't reach the tunnel. Too many tangos between us and the exit. Hale leaned forward. What are your options? Limited, sir. We can try to fight through, but with 18 civilians in tow, we'll take casualties. Heavy casualties. Sarah's mind was racing. There had to be another way. Another exit. Something she'd forgotten. Something that... And then she remembered. Sir! She grabbed Hale's arm. There's another way out. A service stairwell on the east side of the corridor. It goes up to the ground floor. Opens into a kitchen area. From there, it's a straight shot to the north wall. If they can get outside, they can circle around to the extraction point. Stryker's voice came back immediately. I don't see any stairwell, Captain. Just cells and a dead end. It's hidden, Sarah said urgently. There's a section of wall that looks solid, but it's actually a door. Third cell on the left. Back corner. You have to push on a specific stone. Upper right corner, fourth stone from the ceiling. It triggers a release mechanism. Captain, if you're wrong about this, I'm not wrong. Sarah's voice was fierce. That's how they moved prisoners when they didn't want the main guards to know. That's how... She stopped. That's how they took me to El Serpiente. Every time. Through that stairwell, the comms went silent except for gunfire, then Stryker. Found it. The stone. I'm pushing. Holy hell, there's a door here. It's opening. The stairwell goes up 2 flights, Sarah continued. Her voice was shaking but clear. At the top, you'll come out behind an industrial refrigerator. Push it aside. The kitchen is just beyond. North exit is through a service door. It'll be locked, but you can shoot the hinges off. Copy all. Moving now. All teams were taking the alternate route. Alpha team moving with hostages. Bravo team, we need suppressing fire on our 6. The next 5 minutes were hell. Sarah listened to the chaos. Gunfire, explosions, men shouting, the hostages crying. All of it coming through her headset in fragments and bursts. On the thermal monitor, she watched the green signatures climbing. Emerging on the ground floor, moving through the kitchen, reaching the north wall. We're outside, Stryker gasped. All hostages accounted for. Moving to extraction point. Black Hawk 1 is inbound, the pilot reported. 30 seconds. But then Sarah saw something on the monitor that made her blood run cold. A thermal signature on the 3rd floor balcony. Someone tall, broad-shouldered, holding what looked like a rifle. El Serpiente. And he was aiming down at the extraction point. Sniper on the 3rd floor. Sarah screamed into the comms. Balcony, west side. He's got a clear shot at the LZ. But it was too late. She saw the thermal bloom of a muzzle flash, heard the crack through the comms, and watched one of the green signatures on the ground stumble and fall. Man down. Man down! Someone shouted. It's Morrison, another voice said. He's hit bad. The helicopter was landing now. Rotors thundering. The team was dragging the hostages toward it. But Morrison was down. And El Serpiente was lining up another shot. Sarah didn't think, didn't hesitate. She just moved. She ripped off her headset, grabbed a rifle from the weapons rack, and ran for the helicopter door. "Captain Reeves, what the hell are you doing?" Hale shouted, but Sarah was already jumping. Dropping the 10 feet from the hovering helicopter to the ground. Landing hard, rolling, coming up with the rifle in her hands. She was half a mile from the compound. Too far for a normal shot. But Sarah wasn't a normal shooter. She was Ranger qualified, sniper certified, and she'd spent 3 years imagining this exact moment. She dropped to one knee, brought the rifle up, found the scope, adjusted for distance, for windage, for elevation. And there he was, on that balcony, right where she'd known he'd be. El Serpiente, the man who had carved his mark into her skin, the man who had killed Elena, the man who haunted every nightmare she'd had for 3 years. He was aiming at the extraction point again. About to take another shot, Sarah's finger found the trigger. Her breathing slowed. Everything around her went quiet. No helicopters, no gunfire, no shouting. Just her and the rifle and the target. She thought about Elena, about the 23 people who hadn't made it out, about the 18 families who were about to get their loved ones back, about the scar on her neck that would never let her forget, and she pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked. The round flew, 800 meters through mountain air. Through the scope, Sarah saw El Serpiente's head snap back. Saw him drop. Saw the rifle fall from his hands and tumble over the balcony railing. He didn't get back up. Behind her, she heard the helicopter landing. Heard Hale shouting her name. Heard Stryker on the comm saying they were clear. Everyone was aboard. They needed to go now. Sarah lowered the rifle, stood up, turned back toward the helicopter. Hale was standing at the door. His face was furious. But when she got closer, she saw something else in his eyes. Something like respect. That, he said as she climbed aboard, was the most insubordinate, reckless, idiotic thing I've ever seen an officer do. Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir." It also, Hale continued, saved Morrison's life, and probably the whole extraction. The helicopter lifted off. Sarah looked back at the compound, at the place that had taken so much from her. Smoke was rising from the eastern wing. Emergency lights were flashing. And on that third-floor balcony, a body lay still. It was over. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in a cemetery outside Washington, D.C. The stone was simple, modest. It read, Elena Martinez, 1985-2021, hero. Sarah had paid for it herself, had worked with State Department contacts to find Elena's family in Mexico, had made sure they knew what their daughter had done, what she had sacrificed. Footsteps approached behind her. Sarah didn't turn around. She knew who it was. Captain Reeves, Stryker said quietly. "Thought I might find you here, sir." "The hostages are all home safe," Stryker said. "Thought you'd want to know. Even Morrison, he's going to make a full recovery." "That's good news, sir. The State Department is officially denying that Operation Nightfall ever happened, of course. Political complications, just like before." But off the record, and Stryker paused. "Every person involved in that mission knows what you did, what you risked, and we won't forget." Sarah finally turned to look at him. "I just wanted to bring them home, sir. That's all." "I know." Stryker handed her an envelope. "This came through from Colonel Hale, your reassignment orders." Sarah's heart sank. "I'm being transferred?" "Promoted, actually, and reassigned to a joint task force working cartel interdiction operations along the southern border. Seems they need someone with your specific expertise, someone who knows how these organizations think, how they operate." He smiled slightly. "Someone who isn't afraid to jump out of a helicopter to take an 800-meter shot." Sarah opened the envelope, read the orders, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt something like hope. "There's something else," Stryker said. "Before he died, El Serpiente was running a network of compounds throughout the Sierra Madre. Dozens of them. And we have reason to believe there are more hostages, more prisoners, more people who need someone like you to bring them home." Sarah looked back at Elena's grave, at the name carved in stone, at the dates that marked a life cut too short. "I'm in," she said quietly. Stryker nodded. "I thought you might say that. Welcome to the team, Captain. The real team." They stood there for another moment. In the silence. In the shadow of sacrifice. In the space between who Sarah had been and who she was becoming, the scar on her neck would never fade. The memories would never fully heal. But maybe, just maybe, she could take all that pain and turn it into something that mattered, something that saved lives, something that honored the people who hadn't made it. Out, Sarah straightened her uniform, squared her shoulders, and walked away from the grave with purpose in her step. She had work to do, and this time she wasn't going in as a victim, she was going in as a warrior.